I've seen some wild things in my years as a field researcher, but 2025, that year was something else. On Animal Quest, we documented some truly horrifying animal encounters. I still think about the intense moments we captured, the raw power of nature on full display. Let me tell you about one that haunts me to this day. It was October 7th, 2016. The sun hadn't yet touched Wildwood Heights, a wealthy neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado. This place was relatively new, only 5 years old, built right where the Rocky Mountain foothills began. Modern homes lined the streets, backing right up against open space, corridors where wildlife still roamed. A 33-year-old marketing coordinator named Lisa Hartwell lived there. Every morning she would start her day with a 5 a.m. jog through the neighborhood. She'd moved to Wildwood Heights for that mountain living feel, but with all the conveniences of the city. Lisa was dedicated to her fitness, and that morning run was sacred to her. A peaceful time to clear her head and enjoy the mountain air. But autumn had been unusually dry that year. Wildlife officials had warned everyone about increased animal activity in residential areas. Deer, elk, and their predators were venturing closer to people in search of water. There had been several mountain lion sightings, tracks in backyards, a large cat spotted near the retention pond. Lisa had heard the warnings, but she dismissed them. Just typical mountain living concerns, she probably thought. She continued her runs, same route, no deterrence, confident that her familiar neighborhood was safe. What she didn't know was that a 140-pound male mountain lion was stalking a mule deer in a drainage culvert beneath the street she was approaching. Lisa's arrival disrupted the hunt, startling both animals. The deer bolted, disappearing into the darkness, leaving the frustrated mountain lion crouched in the shadows. The attack came without warning. As Lisa passed within 10 feet of the culvert, the mountain lion exploded from the shadows, covering the distance in a single leap. His massive paws struck Lisa between the shoulder blades, sending her crashing onto the asphalt. His weight drove her to the ground. Her scream was cut short as the mountain lion's jaws clamped down on the back of her neck, his teeth puncturing muscle and vertebrae. Razor-sharp claws raked across her back and shoulders, opening deep gashes and severing major blood vessels. The cat used his incredible strength to drag Lisa's body into the culvert. Her body was recovered 3 hours later by police and wildlife personnel. The mountain lion had abandoned his kill, retreating further into the drainage network. Lisa had died from massive trauma to her neck and spine. The mountain lion's killing bite was instantly fatal. The investigation revealed that Lisa had inadvertently interrupted the mountain lion's hunt, triggering the attack. The mountain lion was tracked and euthanized the following day. Then there was Felicity Grant. It was August 19th, 2017, when she arrived at Boulder County Open Space, a vast wilderness known for its rugged terrain and diverse wildlife. This mountainous region stretched across thousands of acres of dense forest and winding trails. Of course, it was also prime habitat for mountain lions and other dangerous predators. Felicity was a 39-year-old fitness influencer from Denver, with over 5,000 social media followers. She had planned what she called her ultimate wilderness transformation experience. Known for her entitled attitude and the belief that her athletic superiority made her exempt from the rules. She'd already caused multiple confrontations at the park entrance. Her demanding personality became evident when she berated the teenage park attendant for suggesting she read safety guidelines, claiming someone of her fitness level didn't need advice from minimum wage employees. Park Ranger Tom Bradley had attempted to brief Felicity on recent mountain lion activity during her permit application process. The area had experienced multiple cougar sightings over the previous month, including aggressive encounters that resulted in temporary trail close. Felicity became increasingly hostile, interrupting Tom repeatedly. I keep thinking about Felicity, the influencer who died on Rabbit Ears Pass Trail. They found her body 3 days later. What was left of her anyway? The scene was exactly what you'd expect from a mountain lion attack. I've read the reports, and I can't shake the details. She had ignored all the warnings, you see. Even torn down notices, believing herself above the rules, that they simply didn't apply to elite athletes like herself. A fellow hiker tried to warn her about solo hiking at dawn. Felicity's response was cruel, saying that jealous locals were trying to sabotage successful influencers. She started her run at 5:30 a.m., pre-dawn, on purpose. She wore noise-canceling headphones, blasting electronic music, and carried raw steaks in her backpack for a post-workout protein meal. Can you imagine? Her erratic running, heavy breathing, and the scent of fresh meat. It was the perfect storm to attract a mountain lion. A 140-pound male mountain lion had been hunting in that area, and he detected the scent of meat from over a mile away. He began tracking her through the forest, stalking her along the ridge, using the rocks and trees for cover. As she rounded a bend, the mountain lion positioned himself on a boulder, about 15 feet above the path. She passed right below him, completely unaware because of her music and her arrogance. The mountain lion launched himself in a devastating aerial attack, striking her from behind with tremendous force. His claws raked down her back, his paws wrapped around her shoulders and neck. His canine teeth clamped down on the back of her neck with surgical precision. They kill their prey by severing the spinal cord. He executed the attack with deadly efficiency, crushing her spinal cord with over 400 pounds per square inch of press. The bite fractured her vertebrae, causing immediate paralysis. He maintained his grip, his claws tearing at her spine and legs, opening deep wounds. Within 2 minutes, she was gone. Spinal cord severed, massive blood loss, suffocation. The mountain lion dragged her body off the trail to a secluded area where he could feed undisturbed. It's a grim story, and it reminds me of another one I came across, a case that also involved a tragic misjudgment. This one took place on December 3rd, 2014. Fluorescent lights shone down on the kennels at the county animal shelter. A young woman named Jennifer Walsh, a 25-year-old veterinary student, was moving between the cages. She volunteered at the shelter and believed every animal deserved a second chance. She gravitated toward the most difficult cases, the animals marked with red cards, scheduled for immediate euthanization. The dog that would cost Jennifer her life was Diesel, a 75-pound pit bull with a scarred muzzle and eyes that seemed to hold years of rage. He'd been surrendered after multiple bite incidents, including a serious attack on a neighbor's child. The behavioral assessment was clear. He was too dangerous for adoption. He was scheduled for euthanization, but Jennifer had been watching him for 3 days, looking for some sign of a gentle soul beneath his aggressive exterior. She saw him pace, heard him growl, watched him destroy every toy. But she also noticed what she thought was vulnerability. Moments when he pressed against the back wall, softening when he thought no one was watching. Shelter protocol was clear. Dogs like Diesel were never to be handled alone. But Jennifer had convinced herself that his aggression was fear-based, that he just needed one-on-one attention. On that December afternoon, with most staff busy, Jennifer made a decision that would cost her her life. She approached Diesel. The scream was cut short. It's a sound I've heard described too many times in my research, and it always stays with me. In this case, it was Jennifer's scream, as the dog's teeth sank deep into her neck, severing major blood vessels in a single bite. Diesel's reaction had been immediate and threatening when Jennifer approached his kennel with a slip lead and the key to the isolation room. His lips pulled back, revealing yellowed teeth. Hackles rose along his neck, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. Every aspect of his body language screamed danger, but Jennifer interpreted these signs as fear rather than aggression. The moment the kennel door opened, Diesel's demeanor shifted from threatening to calculating. He seemed to assess Jennifer's position in the open doorway behind her. This brief hesitation gave Jennifer false confidence to slip the lead around his neck and guide him toward the isolation room. Once inside, Jennifer closed the door and removed Diesel's lead, believing freedom of movement would help him relax. The room was small, 8 by 10 feet, with concrete walls and no furniture except a metal folding chair. It was designed for safety, but also meant there was nowhere to run. For several minutes, Diesel stood rigid in the center, his eyes never leaving Jennifer's face. She sat in the chair and began talking to him, her voice gentle and encouraging, completely unaware she was being evaluated by a predator. The attack came when Jennifer stood and took a step toward Diesel, her hand extended in what she intended as a peaceful gesture. To Diesel, the movement represented a threat requiring immediate action. His 75 lbs launched across the room with explosive force, his jaws targeting Jennifer's throat with precision. His jaws locked onto their target with mechanical efficiency. Jennifer's hands clawed desperately at the dog's head, but Diesel had been bred for combat, his grip unbreakable once engaged. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone while maintaining his hold. Blood sprayed across the concrete walls as Jennifer's struggles grew weaker, her body going into shock from the massive trauma. The attack was swift, brutal, and utterly without mercy. Other volunteers heard Jennifer's initial scream and rushed toward the isolation room, but the heavy door was locked from the inside. By the time they could locate the key and safely enter, Jennifer lay motionless on the concrete floor, her life ebbing away in the pool of blood. Diesel stood over her body, his muzzle stained red, his eyes still burning with the same aggressive intensity that had marked him for euthanization. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Jennifer's injuries were beyond medical intervention. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Her dream of becoming a veterinarian ended by the very type of animal she hoped to save. Diesel was immediately sedated and euthanized, his death as swift and clinical as the attack to have preceded it. The investigation that followed was thorough but predictable. Jennifer had violated multiple safety protocols, ignored clear warning signs, and placed herself in a situation that experienced professionals would have avoided. The shelter implemented new security measures, including electronic locks on isolation rooms and mandatory buddy systems for all volunteer activities. Jennifer's death became a cautionary tale in veterinary schools across the country, a reminder that good intentions and academic knowledge are no substitute for experience and proper safety protocols. Her family established a scholarship in her name, but requested that it go to students studying wildlife conservation rather than domestic animal care. A final acknowledgement that some animals, no matter how much love they're shown, remain fundamentally dangerous. It was April 17, 2018, and the humid Florida air hung heavy over the grounds of Sunshine Primate Sanctuary, a controversial facility that claims to rescue primates while actually exploiting them for tourist photographs. The 20-acre property housed over 30 primates in substandard conditions, generating revenue through photo sessions that legitimate sanctuaries would never permit. The afternoon sun beat down on concrete enclosure where gorillas, chimpanzees, and other primates paced restlessly behind inadequate barriers. Jessica Rodriguez, a 31-year-old veterinary technician from Tampa, had visited the facility with her husband, Carlos, as part of what she believed was a legitimate conservation effort. Jessica had always been passionate about animal welfare, taking photos of animals throughout her career to document their care and recovery. Her genuine love for animals had driven her to pursue veterinary technology training while working nights to support herself through school. Jessica had dedicated her career to animal welfare, earning her veterinary technology degree through years of hard work and sacrifice. Her passion for primate conservation had led her to volunteer at legitimate sanctuaries and support organizations working to protect great apes in the wild. Jessica genuinely believed that her visit to Sunshine Primate Sanctuary would help promote conservation efforts through the photos she planned to take. That afternoon, Jessica was participating in what the facility marketed as an educational encounter with King, a 350 lb silverback gorilla who had been acquired from a defunct research facility. The sanctuary's minimal safety measures consisted of a chain-link barrier that separated visitors from the gorilla's enclosure, with no additional protection or supervision from qualified staff. Silverback gorillas are among the most powerful primates on Earth, with adult males weighing up to $400 and possessing the strength of 10 grown men. These magnificent animals are highly intelligent and emotionally complex, but they are also territorial and can become extremely aggressive when they perceive threats to their domain. Gorillas. I've seen the footage of gorillas shifting from calm to violent in seconds. Their language is complex and their power is immense. It's a chilling reminder of the wildness that lies beneath a seemingly placid surface. Their hands can grip with crushing force, and those canine teeth, they can inflict severe wounds. I remember reading about a woman named Jessica. She approached a gorilla enclosure with her camera, wanting to capture images that showed the animal's intelligence. The gorilla, named King, seemed calm, observing the visitors. Jessica started taking photos, excited to share a message of conservation. Then she made a fatal decision. She reached through the fence, thinking that physical contact would create a more powerful image, believing King's calm demeanor was friendliness. She mistook patience for an invitation. King's reaction was instantaneous. He grabbed her arm with incredible strength, pulling her against the fence. Her scream, the report said, filled the air. He grabbed her head and shoulders, pulling her harder against the fence. His territorial instincts took over. The attack was brutal, inflicting devastating trauma. Her struggles only seemed to increase his aggression. Within minutes, it was over. Jessica was dead. King maintained his grip on her lifeless form, displaying threatening behavior. Emergency responders arrived, but it was too late. The investigation revealed the sanctuary was an illegal roadside zoo, exploiting animals and visitors. It was shut down, and King was moved to an accredited facility. Jessica's death led to stricter regulations for animal sanctuaries. Her family established a foundation to support legitimate primate conservation efforts. Then there was Maria Santos in North Carolina, March 18, 2017. It was the first warm evening of spring in the upscale neighborhood of Mountain View Estates. Maria, a 41-year-old single mother, worked as a dog walker, making her evening rounds. She'd been doing this for 3 years, building a loyal clientele. Her income helped support her teenage daughter, supplementing her day job at a local veterinary clinic. The development had been carved out of mountain forest, and recent construction had disrupted animal movement patterns. The Wildlife Resources Commission had issued warnings about increased bear activity. Maria was aware of the warnings but had never encountered any dangerous animals. She carried pepper spray and had received training on wildlife encounters. That evening, she was walking 3 large dogs when she noticed unusual activity near a row of garbage cans. Adult female black bears typically weigh between 200 and 400 pounds. Mother bears with cubs are extremely protective. Bears have an excellent sense of smell, and they are drawn to residential areas by the scent of garbage, pet food, and other things that attract them. When surprised or cornered, a bear can run up to 35 miles per hour. It possesses the strength to break down doors and overturn cars. And its claws and teeth? They can inflict devastating injuries, especially if you threaten their cubs or territory. I remember reading about a woman named Maria who learned this the hard way. As she approached an intersection one morning where several garbage cans had been placed for pickup, she found a 300-pound female black bear with 2 small cubs rummaging through the containers. The mother bear had torn open several bags and was feeding on discarded food while her cubs played nearby. Maria immediately recognized the danger and began backing away slowly. But the 3 dogs she was walking became agitated and started barking aggressively at the bears. The mother bear's protective instincts immediately kicked in. She perceived the barking dogs as a direct threat to her cub's safety. She rose to her full height and began making aggressive vocalizations, positioning herself between the dogs and her offspring. Maria tried to control the excited animals and retreat to a safe distance, but the dogs continued barking and lunging, which only escalated the dangerous situation. The 300-pound mother bear charged toward Maria and the dogs with explosive speed, covering the 30 yards between them in mere seconds. Maria attempted to run while holding 3 leashes, but became entangled and fell hard onto the asphalt street. The dogs scattered in different directions, leaving Maria vulnerable and unable to escape as the enraged bear approached. The mother bear's massive paws struck Maria's back and shoulders with bone-crushing force, driving her face first into the pavement while her weight pinned the smaller woman to the ground. The bear's powerful jaws clamped down on Maria's head and neck, her teeth puncturing through skull bone and severing vital arteries. Maria's attempts to protect herself proved futile against an animal possessing several times her strength and weight. The bear's razor-sharp claws raked across Maria's torso and limbs, each swipe opening deep gashes that caused massive blood loss and tissue damage. The mother bear's attack was methodical and brutal, driven by maternal instincts to eliminate any threat to her cub's safety. Maria's struggles grew weaker as trauma and blood loss overwhelmed her system. Residents in nearby homes heard the commotion and called 911 while attempting to scare the bear away, with loud noises and bright lights. The mother bear eventually retreated with her cubs toward the forest, leaving Maria motionless on the street. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but were unable to save Maria, who had died from massive head and neck trauma. The investigation revealed that improperly secured garbage containers had attracted the mother bear and her cubs to the residential area, creating the conditions for the fatal encounter. Wildlife officials determined that the bear had been acting defensively to protect her offspring and was not exhibiting abnormally aggressive behavior. The mother bear and cubs were successfully relocated to a remote mountain area away from human populations. Maria's death prompted immediate changes to Mountain View Estate's waste management protocols, including the installation of bear-proof garbage containers and new guidelines for refuge. The community also implemented an early warning system for wildlife sightings and began requiring all residents to remove potential attractants from their properties. It was October 15, 2016, and the Georgia sun was setting over Rebecca Martinez's 10-acre property, casting long shadows across a maze of makeshift kennels and chain-link runs. The constant barking that echoed across the land had become the soundtrack of her life. 40 rescue dogs, each one carrying the scars of abuse, neglect, or abandonment. At 34, Rebecca had spent 8 years building her unofficial sanctuary, taking in the dogs that other shelters wouldn't touch, the aggressive ones, the biters, the animals marked for immediate euthanization. Her recent divorce had left her financially strained and emotionally isolated, with only her dogs for company on the remote property. Rebecca's neighbors had grown used to the noise, though some whispered concerns about the woman who seemed to care more about dangerous animals than her own safety. She rarely left the property anymore, moving between enclos with hands scarred from countless bites, badges of honor in her mind. Friends who still visited noticed the changes in Rebecca over the months. She'd grown thinner, more withdrawn, speaking more about her dogs than anything else. Her ex-husband had tried to warn her about the dangers, but Rebecca dismissed his concerns as jealousy over her dedication. The local veterinarian had stopped making house calls after Rex had lunged at him through a fence gap, requiring stitches on his forearm. Even the feed delivery drivers had begun leaving supplies at the gate rather than approaching the main compound. The main enclosure housed her three largest rescues: Rex, a 90-pound pit bull mix with a history of severe abuse; Titan, an 85-pound Rottweiler cross; and Scar, a 75-pound mixed breed whose face told the story of his fighting past. What Rebecca didn't realize was that these three had been forming an alliance over the past few weeks, establishing a hierarchy that put them at odds with anyone who came between them and food. The warning signs had been there for anyone trained to recognize them. The three dogs had begun sleeping closer together, sharing food bowls and displaying coordinated territorial behavior when other dogs approached. They'd started following Rebecca's movements more intently during feeding times, their body language shifting from grateful anticipation to something more predatory. But Rebecca, exhausted from managing 40 animals alone and emotionally invested in seeing progress, I sometimes think about how easily things can shift, how quickly a relationship can change. I read once about a woman named Rebecca who ran an unlicensed animal rescue operation. She thought she was saving dogs, giving them a second chance. But she missed the signals, those subtle cues that spoke of danger. Her daily feeding routine was always the most dangerous part of the day. She'd fill buckets with kibble, the clanging echoing and exciting the dogs. One evening, after a thunderstorm, as she approached the enclosure, something felt different. The air felt charged. Then she slipped on the muddy ground, the buckets crashed, and everything changed. Rex, one of the dogs, shifted his focus. In that moment, she wasn't his savior. She was competition. The attack was sudden. Rex, all 90 pounds of him, slammed into her. His jaws tore into her shoulder. The other dogs, Titan and Scar, joined in, their pack instincts taking over. Her screams were lost in the air. It lasted 10 minutes before they backed away, leaving her broken. Her body lay undiscovered for 3 days until a delivery driver arrived. The dogs were euthanized. The tragedy led to new regulations, but for Rebecca, it was too late. It makes you wonder about the boundaries we think we understand, how easily they can be crossed. I was reading about another incident, this one at the Thorzou Safari Park in France, back on April 3, 2017. The wolf sector, designed to mimic the wild stillness of Yellowstone, held a hidden danger. A woman named Camille Morel, a fitness instructor, was there for a weekend getaway. She was known for her routine, her precision. She'd visited before, drawn to the tranquility of waking to animal sounds. I remember reading the autopsy report, the clinical language barely masking the horror of it all. Death by exsanguination, massive blood loss due to multiple deep lacerations and crushing trauma to the limbs. Camille, they called her. She'd been jogging just before 7:30 a.m. near the Thorzou Safari. She must have thought she was still on the perimeter trail when she unknowingly crossed into the wolf enclosure. The wolves, restless after a cold night, picked up her scent. From the observation tower, a zookeeper saw her, realized the terrible mistake, and radioed for help. But it was too late. The wolves didn't charge at first. They emerged from the trees, low to the ground, tails stiff, heads aligned. Camille slowed, confused, thinking the barrier must be nearby. But then they advanced, a slow, deliberate arc, and she froze. She turned and ran. The wolves matched her pace, then accelerated. She sprinted, glancing back once. Near a drainage trench, her foot caught, and she fell. Before she could get up, the lead wolf clamped down on her thigh. Another lunged at her shoulder. Her scream. The report said it carried across the enclosure, high and ragged. The zookeeper sounded the alarm. Rangers were rerouted, but it took them nearly 10 minutes to arrive. By then, 2 more wolves had joined. She tried to crawl toward the ditch, but the lead wolf re-gripped, sinking its teeth into her hip. She struck out, scraping the gravel, but one of the animals bit into her arm, shaking until it tore free. Within moments, she was on her back, thrashing as the pack pulled from opposite sides. She kicked weakly once more, then went still. The rangers arrived in a vehicle, finding the wolves clustered over her body. Warning shots scattered them. They found Camille on her side, clothing torn, deep bites from shoulder to thigh. No pulse. Later, her family filed a lawsuit against the zoo, alleging gross negligence. They settled quietly, without appeal. The zoo implemented new safety protocols, interlocks and alarms. It was July 22, 2016, when the Oklahoma sun beat down on the dusty grounds of Wildwood Big Hat Sanctuary, a private facility nestled among rolling hills outside Tulsa. It housed over 20 rescued lions, tigers, and other exotic cats in a collection of chain-link enclosures. The afternoon air shimmered with heat, the sounds of roaring and pacing echoing as the cats sought shade. Ashley Martinez, a 23-year-old college student from Dallas, discovered the sanctuary on social media while road tripping with her boyfriend. She was always looking for unique photo opportunities, driven by a need to push boundaries and seek attention. She'd grown up taking pictures, always seeking that perfect, daring shot. Her psychology major gave her confidence, but her academic knowledge didn't extend to understanding animal behavior. That afternoon, Ashley and Jacob paid for a close encounter experience, a chance to observe big cats during feeding demonstrations. The facility operated in a legal gray area, offering interactions that legitimate zoos would never permit. African lions are apex predators, retaining their wild instincts. Adult males can weigh up to 420 pounds and possess incredible strength, speed, and territorial behaviors. They view humans as either threats or prey. Their powerful jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch, and their claws can inflict fatal wounds. I've seen photographs that still haunt me. Ashley, smiling, moments before she climbed over that barrier. She wanted a selfie with Caesar, a 400-pound African lion at a roadside sanctuary. What she got was a brutal lesson in instinct, territory, and the devastating power of a predator. The sanctuary owner was giving a tour, sharing what I can only imagine were embellished stories of animal rescues. Caesar, raised by hand, seemed calm. Too calm, perhaps. Ashley saw an opportunity for the ultimate photo. She whispered to Jake, her companion, to distract the owner while she hopped the fence. It was a 4-foot chain-link barrier. Caesar was only about 10 feet away, his golden eyes following her, but showing no immediate aggression. She crouched, phone extended, ready for the shot. That's when Caesar changed. His ears flattened, his tail twitched, and then explosive suddenness. Millions of years of programming kicked in. Ashley, in his territory, became prey. He covered the distance in a single bound. Her phone flew. His paws struck her chest, driving her back. Claws found purchase. His jaws clamped on her neck, those 4-inch canines puncturing muscle and vertebrae. Territorial instinct took over. Claws raked, the bite held. Ashley weakened from blood loss and spinal trauma. Jake's screams brought the owner running, but it was too late. Caesar stood over his kill. Within minutes, Ashley was gone. Emergency responders arrived, but there was nothing they could do. The facility, it turned out, was operating without proper permits or insurance, violating safety regulations. Caesar was relocated to a proper sanctuary. Ashley's death led to stricter regulations and enhanced safety education. Then, some years later, May 21, 2018, in Grand Paradiso National Park, northern Italy. Another story, another tragic intersection of humans and wildlife. I've read accounts of animals behaving boldly around humans, and I always find myself wondering what series of events led to such a tragedy. I think of Giovanni, for example. He died because of unsecured rations. I picture him collapsing on the ground, blood pooling around his collar. His wife, Elena, screamed. She swung a torch, striking one of the juvenile wolves. The rest scattered. She knelt beside him, whispering his name, but his chest stopped moving. The signal was poor at that altitude, but someone managed to contact park emergency services. Rangers arrived before sunrise. Giovanni's body remained where it fell, partially covered by his wife's jacket. His face was intact, but the left side of his neck showed deep, crushing injuries. Investigators determined the fatal wound likely occurred as he twisted while the wolf held his arm. A freak tear along the artery caused near-instant collapse. Officials ruled it a food-provoked escalation involving juveniles. A short-term monitoring and deterrence program followed, but no culling was ordered. The pack showed no further boldness toward humans. Giovanni's funeral was held 5 days later in Aosta. Then there's the story of the Lawson family. It was July 15, 2016, when they arrived at the remote Sundarbans National Park in West Bengal, India. The vast mangrove delta stretched endlessly before them, a maze of tidal channels and dense vegetation where the Ganges River meets the Bay of Bengal. Ancient mangrove trees rose from the brackish water, their aerial roots creating an impenetrable network. This UNESCO World Heritage Site harbored one of the world's most dangerous ecosystems. Saltwater crocodiles lurked beneath the surface, and venomous snakes coiled in the canopy above. Genevieve Lawson, a 42-year-old real estate agent from London, had insisted on booking the most expensive boat tour package available. She was known for her demanding personality. She'd already berated their local guide, Ravi, multiple times during the morning briefing. Her husband, David, a 45-year-old investment banker, tried unsuccessfully to moderate her increasingly aggressive behavior. Their teenage children, Emma and Jake watched uncomfortably as their mother dismissed every safety warning as unnecessary fear-mongering designed to limit their premium experience. Ravi, despite his 15 years of guiding experience in those treacherous waters, found himself intimidated by Genevieve's constant threats of negative reviews and demands for closer wildlife encounters. The motorboat had been equipped with safety barriers specifically to keep tourists safe from the apex predators that ruled this ancient domain. But Genevieve viewed these precautions as obstacles preventing her from capturing the authentic jungle photographs she demanded. The Sunderban's mangroves serve as the exclusive hunting ground for the world's largest population of Bengal tigers, apex predators that have adapted uniquely to this aquatic environment. Unlike their mainland cousins, these tigers are exceptional swimmers and have developed an unusual willingness to hunt humans in water. Weighing up to 400 pounds and measuring over 10 feet in length, these magnificent cats possess 4-inch canine teeth capable of crushing windpipes and delivering fatal wounds within seconds. Their distinctive orange coat with black stripes provides perfect camouflage among the dappled shadows of the mangrove forest, making them virtually invisible as they move silently through the water. During the afternoon tour, their boat approached a narrow channel where Ravi spotted fresh tiger tracks along the muddy shoreline. He immediately cut the engine and whispered for complete silence, explaining that a large male tiger had recently passed through the area. Despite his urgent warnings about remaining in the boat, Genevieve became frustrated with the distance and declared she needed closer photographs. Against all protests from her family and guide, Genevieve stepped over the safety barrier and lowered herself into the chest-deep channel water. The murky tidal water concealed her movements as she waded toward the mangrove shoreline, camera held high above her head. Unknown to the group, a massive 400-pound male Bengal tiger had been resting in the dense vegetation upstream and had detected their boat's engine minutes earlier. Sunderban's tigers are ambush predators that use water as their primary hunting medium, approaching prey with complete silence while swimming. This particular male had successfully killed humans before and recognized the splashing sounds of vulnerable prey entering his territory. The tiger slipped into the water upstream and began swimming toward Genevieve with only its eyes and nose visible above the surface. When Genevieve reached the muddy shoreline and began photographing tiger tracks, she remained completely unaware of the approaching predator. The tiger closed the final 20 feet underwater, using its powerful limbs to propel itself through the murky channel with deadly precision. The attack erupted from the water with explosive violence. The massive tiger surfaced directly behind Genevieve and immediately clamped its powerful jaws around her throat from behind. The 4-inch canine teeth punctured through her neck muscles and crushed her windpipe with over 1,000 pounds of bite force. The tiger's signature killing technique involved suffocating prey by crushing the throat, and the massive prez collapsed her airway instantly. Genevieve's body went rigid as the tiger's teeth severed major blood vessels in her neck, causing massive internal bleeding. The predator's powerful forelimbs wrapped around her torso while its hind legs found purchase on her lower body, holding her in an inescapable grip. The tiger then began its drowning technique, pulling her backward into deeper water while maintaining its crushing grip. There's a silence that descends when a predator claims its kill, a stillness that feels heavier than any other quiet I've known. It's a silence born of finality. I remember reading of a tiger attack, the details stark and brutal, a crushing bite to the throat, severed arteries, forced submersion. The victim, Genevieve, was gone in minutes, dragged into the mangrove maze. It was November 15, 2016, in the remote forests of Primorsky Krai, eastern Russia. Snow fell, muting the sounds of the forest. Nikolai Baranov's radio had been silent since morning. He was 52, a forestry worker who managed patrols, monitoring traps, logging and poaching. He lived alone near Dalner, his life mead by the forest's rhythms. That week, he was surveying a hunting reserve, following reports of wolves nearing villages. He rode out on his snowmobile before dawn, with bread, tea, a hand axe, and flares. He preferred working alone. His assignment was simple: document animal tracks after the first snow. Wolves were increasingly active, driven from higher ground by a decline in wild boar. These wolves could travel up to 20 miles in a single night, driven by hunger. Their diets shifted with the seasons: deer in autumn, carrion, smaller mammals. In winter, when prey vanished beneath ice and snow, instinct sometimes blurred into desperation. A human scent might trigger the same ancient reflex to follow, test, and close the distance. Locals warned of animals following sled trails at dusk. Nikolai heard the warnings that morning, but didn't take them seriously. He checked his flare gun but left his rifle behind, citing its weight. By noon, the weather had shifted, gusting snow and dropping visibility. His supervisor's radio attempts went unanswered. When evening came and Nikolai still hadn't returned, Yevgen, a neighboring ranger and longtime friend, prepared to follow his route. Yevgeny rode out around 5 p.m., a flashlight mounted on his snowmobile and a sidearm holstered under his coat. Tracks were faint but visible. A single snowmobile line winding north, then stopping abruptly about 800 meters from the ridge. The engine was half buried in snow, its headlight faintly glowing. Prints showed Nikolai had dismounted, perhaps to clear ice from the track. Around the site, another pattern emerged: paw marks, deep and overlapping, circling. The snow bore drag lines, evidence of pacing. Then the circle tightened. From that point, the scene unfolded through what Yevgeny later described as a sequence of struggle. Human footprints turned erratic, moving backward. A snapped branch at chest height, a torn glove 10 feet away. A smear of blood marked the snowmobile's side panel. 30 feet beyond, the snow showed clear impressions of multiple bodies pressing down. Wolves and man. The wolves had likely approached silently, using the cover of snowfall and wind. Initial bites were to the legs, pulling him down. Blood spray against nearby birch bark indicated arterial injury within seconds. The evidence suggested coordinated movement. Bite patterns indicated coordinated restraint from multiple angles. His jacket was shredded along the spine, showing where one animal had clamped onto his back, while another tore at the neck. Boot prints ended mid-stride, replaced by drag marks. Ivani followed them cautiously, revolver drawn. He found the body 30 meters downhill near a frozen stream. The snow around it was flattened and red. The wolves had likely fed briefly before retreating. Later investigations showed at least 4 individuals: 2 larger adults, 2 smaller juveniles. Ivani radioed the base immediately. It took nearly an hour for a snow vehicle to arrive. The men lifted the body onto a tarp, careful not to disturb the bite patterns for analysis. The stench of blood lingered even in the cold. The pack didn't return, but distant howls echoed as the rescuers secured the area. Nikolai's remains were taken to Dahlner for examination. Autopsy confirmed catastrophic blood loss with multiple punctures to major vessels and crushing trauma to the neck vertebrae. Time of death was estimated shortly after the onset of the attack. The official report listed predatory behavior exacerbated by winter scarcity. Specialists noted that 2016 saw an unusual decline in prey density across the region. The incident received a single mention on regional news, framed as a tragic encounter during severe weather. There was no footage, only photographs from the recovery team that were never released publicly. It was June 14, 2015, and the Sunset Lake subdivision in suburban Tampa, Florida, was settling into another warm summer evening. Walter Walt Kowalski, a 67-year-old retired plumber from Ohio, was enjoying his 5th year in the Sunshine State from the comfort of his backyard patio, which overlooked one of the community's scenic waterways. Walt had moved. There's a place in Florida where alligators, apex predators unchanged for 200 million years, can exert 3,000 pounds of press per square inch with their jaws. Perfectly adapted as ambush hunters, they consume anything they can overpower: birds, fish, mammals, and occasionally humans. I remember reading about a man named Walt who learned this lesson in the most brutal way imaginable. He'd moved to Florida from Ohio seeking year-round golf and a more relaxed life. He bought a house with water access in the Sunset Lakes community, built on reclaimed wetlands. He loved to sit on his patio, beer in hand, watching the sunset and feeding the ducks that visited his backyard. The artificial waterways were all connected to natural creeks flowing into Tampa Bay. Wildlife moved freely between developed and undeveloped areas. Heavy rains brought more alligators, but Walt, like many Floridians, had learned to coexist. His duck feeding, though, had created a reliable food source. One evening, while relaxing on his patio, Walt noticed his fishing lure was tangled near his dock. He waded into the knee-deep water, using a net to free it. He'd done this many times before, confident the shallow water was safe. He was wrong. The attack came from below. A 12-foot alligator, submerged and motionless for over an hour, exploded upward, its jaws clamped on Walt's right leg with bone-crushing force, instantly fracturing his femur and severing major arteries. The alligator initiated a death roll, spinning violently in the water. Walt was pulled into the canal, where the alligator's advantages became overwhelming. Within minutes, Walt was gone, lost to drowning and blood loss. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but the alligator had already retreated with Walt's body. The investigation revealed that Walt's duck feeding had inadvertently attracted the alligator, creating a fatal situation. The community immediately installed warning signs around the waterways. Then there was Michael Chen, a 35-year-old software engineer from Seattle. He was on a cross-country road trip celebrating a promotion. He'd always been fascinated by technology and the outdoors, hiking in the Pacific Northwest. He was confident in his ability to analyze risks, but his experience with dangerous wildlife was limited. He had grown up in urban Seattle, developing his love of nature through weekend camping trips. I'll never forget reading about the alligator's bite. Over 3,000 pounds of pres per square inch. It's a force that can shatter bones instantly. They can even launch themselves partially out of the water with explosive force. Reading that, I understood the danger that Michael faced. The airboat tour had been progressing smoothly for nearly an hour when the guide spotted a massive alligator sunning itself on a mud bank, only about 20 feet away. This reptile was truly exceptional, easily 12 feet in length and weighing over 800 pounds. It was perfectly still in the afternoon heat, a prehistoric form right before my eyes, or at least in the photographs. Michael, caught up in the moment, began photographing the magnificent predator, eager to capture images of such an impressive wild animal to show his colleagues back in Seattle. His enthusiasm, unfortunately, overcame his caution, and he leaned farther over the boat's edge to get closer shots. The fatal moment arrived when Michael's phone slipped from his grip and began falling toward the dark water. Without thinking, he lunged forward, extending his body over the side of the airboat, desperately trying to catch his expensive device before it disappeared into the swamp. The alligator, with predatory patience, had been monitoring the boat's presence, and Michael's sudden movement triggered an immediate attack response. The 800-pound reptile exploded from the mudbank with terrifying speed, its powerful tail propelling it through the water like a missile aimed directly at Michael's exposed position. The alligator's massive jaws clamped down on Michael's outstretched arm with bone-crushing force. That immense bite pres instantly shattered bones and severed major arteries. Michael's scream of shock and pain echoed across the swamp as the reptile's momentum pulled him completely over the side of the airboat and into the murky water. The tour guide and other passengers grabbed desperately at Michael's legs, trying to pull him back into the boat while the massive alligator maintained its crushing grip. Then the alligator began its signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its devastating grip on Michael's arm. Michael's struggles grew weaker as the combination of massive blood loss, crushing injuries, and drowning overwhelmed his body. The alligator's grip never loosened as it continued the death roll with mechanical precision, each rotation causing additional trauma while ensuring its prey could not escape. Within minutes, Michael's movement ceased as the alligator's brutal assault proved fatal. The massive reptile dragged his body into deeper water, where it disappeared beneath the surface with its kill. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, but Michael's body was not recovered until the following day, when wildlife officials located the massive alligator and retrieved the remains. The tour company immediately implemented physical barriers around all passenger seating areas and enhanced safety briefings for future tours. Michael's death prompted his family to advocate for stricter safety regulations in the wildlife tourism industry. The incident highlighted the deadly consequences of ignoring safety warnings around apex predators and became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing photography over personal safety. It was July 8, 2017, and the Detroit summer heat shimmered off abandoned lots as Maria Santos loaded her car with dog food and water. At 28, she'd spent 5 years walking dogs by day and feeding Detroit's feral population by night. Recently laid off, she'd been spending more time in dangerous neighborhoods, trying to help animals most people considered beyond saving. The economic collapse had hit Detroit hard, leaving entire neighborhoods abandoned and creating perfect breeding grounds for packs of wild dogs. These weren't lost pets. They were second and third generation feral animals that had never known human kindness, surviving by scavenging and defending territory with savage efficiency. Maria's regular route took her through 6 abandoned lots, each home to a different pack. She knew their hierarchies, feeding schedules, and individual personalities. But the newest group concerned her the most. 6 dogs led by a large German Shepherd mix she'd nicknamed Alpha, including several animals she didn't recognize. This pack was hungrier, more aggressive, and less predictable than the others, but Maria's compassion overruled her caution. These animals needed help, and she was the only one willing to provide it. As twilight settled over the abandoned neighborhood, Maria parked near the lot where Alpha's pack had made their home. The area was a wasteland of broken concrete and waist-high weeds, perfect cover for animals that had learned to hunt and hide. Maria had been feeding this pack for 3 weeks, always maintaining a safe distance, but tonight felt different. The dogs seemed more agitated, their movements more coordinated, their attention more focused on her than the food. What she didn't realize was that pack dynamics had shifted with the addition of 3 new dogs, animals that saw humans not as providers but as competitors. Alpha emerged from the shadows first, his 80-pound frame moving with predatory grace. Behind him came the others, a scarred pit bull mix, 2 smaller dogs, and 3 newcomers whose breeds were impossible to determine. Their eyes reflected the dim street light like mirrors. Maria began distributing food as always, tossing handfuls of kibble in different directions to prevent fighting. But tonight, the strategy backfired. Instead of dispersing to eat, the dogs began to circle. I've always been drawn to stories where the line between domesticity and wildness blurs. It's a chilling reminder that nature, even when seemingly tamed, can revert with terrifying speed. I recall the case of Maria, a woman who fed a pack of stray dogs in an abandoned neighborhood. She made the fatal mistake of stepping in to break up a fight between 2 of the smaller dogs. In that instant, the pack saw her not as a provider, but as competition. Alpha, the leader, attacked with devastating force, and the others quickly joined in. Maria's screams went unheard in that desolate place. Their coordinated attack spoke to generations of predatory instincts, refined by urban survival. These weren't pets gone bad, but wild animals who had learned to see humans as threats or prey. It took 3 days to capture all 6 dogs, and they were euthanized soon after. Their wild nature, it was determined, made rehabilitation impossible. Then there's the story of Kendra Sullivan, a wildlife photographer who arrived at the Nyamba Island Chimpanzee Sanctuary in Uganda in September 2015. The sanctuary was a refuge for orphaned and rescued chimpanzees. Kendra, commissioned to document the rehabilitation work, was known for her fearless approach. But her confidence, bordering on recklessness, would prove disastrous. Dr. James Mukasa, the sanctuary's director, and Peter Sally, a caretaker, repeatedly warned her about the unpredictable nature of these animals. But Kendra brushed off their concerns, believing her experience with domestic animals gave her an innate understanding of animal behavior. The sanctuary housed 49 rescued chimpanzees, many traumatized. Despite rehabilitation, these animals retained all the instincts and physical capabilities of their wild counterparts. Chimpanzees are among the most powerful primates, with strength 5 times greater than an adult human. I've read accounts of chimpanzee attacks, and one detail always haunts me. They instinctively target the face, the hands, the genitals. It's not random. It's calculated to inflict maximum damage. I remember reading about a woman named Kendra who suffered unimaginable injuries. A chimpanzee named Bosau, with canine teeth over 2 inches long, attacked her. The force was so great, about 1,300 lb per square inch, that it immediately fractured the bones in her forearm. He pulled her against the barrier, and for nearly 2 minutes, this went on. Biting, clawing, his jaws crushed facial bones, tore away skin and muscle. Major blood vessels in her neck were severed. Her attempts to defend herself were useless. Her fingers were crushed. Another man, Peter, heard her screams and used high-press water hoses to drive Boso away, but it was too late. Kendra died from blood loss and facial trauma before emergency services could reach her. It makes you wonder about the unseen dangers lurking even in familiar places. February 9, 2014, in Saskatchewan. The morning light came slow through the northern boreal forest. It seemed like a routine trip for 2 men, David Lasky and his cousin Jeff. David, a part-time wildlife photographer, often ventured into those woods. His cousin Jeff, 42, often joined him on winter runs to retrieve SD cards from trail cams. They'd heard distant howls before, but never close. David believed wolves avoided humans by instinct. The plan was simple. A 2-hour ride by snowmobile, a short hike to the cameras, and back before dusk. Wolves in the region were typically gray, thick-coated animals averaging about 90 pounds. They moved in tight family groups, relying on coordination rather than speed. The men dressed in insulated gear and carried only a single red flare for safety. By 9:30 a.m., they parked their snowmobile near the creek and began walking the last half-mile through packed snow, their breath hanging in the still air. At first, everything was normal. They reached the first camera, brushed off the lens, and swapped the SD card. Around 10:15, as they crossed the creek, Jeff's boot slipped on a patch of ice. David crouched to help him up, steadying his cousin by the arm. That was when both noticed faint movement among the tree line across the creek. The animals stood still at first, only their eyes catching light. Jeff straightened and waved his arms, shouting to scare them off. The wolves didn't run. Unbeknownst to the men, a freshly killed deer lay half-buried in snow about 20 yards behind the tree line. A cached carcass the wolves had dragged there the night before. The pack was food-stressed, defending the cache rather than hunting. They began to fan out slowly, forming a loose semicircle. David muttered that they were just curious that noise would drive them away. But even as he spoke, one of the wolves lowered its head and started advancing. The men began backing up the slope toward their snowmobile, moving quickly but without turning. The wolves followed, quiet and steady. Then the first lunge came, a gray blur across the ice, jaws clamping onto the back of David's leg. The impact drove him face first into the snow. Jeff spun and reached for the flare, but his gloves fumbled with the cap. Two more wolves broke from the trees, bounding fast, their paws sending up bursts of white powder. David tried to kick free, leaving streaks of blood against the snow. He managed to roll onto his back and swing an arm, hitting one wolf across the muzzle with his camera bag. But another struck from the side, teeth finding his shoulder. Jeff finally snapped the flare to life, the red flame hissing. He swung it toward the animals. One wolf snarled and darted back, fur singed along its flank, but the others held ground. David was on his knees now, one hand pressed to his thigh, blood pumping dark and fast through his fingers. He tried to rise, but his leg gave out beneath him. Jeff charged forward with the flare, yelling, waving it more aggressively. The heat drove them back momentarily, circling just out of reach. David slumped sideways. I've spent years reading reports, and some stick with me more than others. The one that listed the cause of death as exsanguination from femoral artery trauma consistent with large animal bites. I can still see that phrase in my mind. It was about a young man named David. Jeff, David's cousin, was panting, his breath shallow. The flare he held burned steadily, hissing as he swung it in wide arcs, forcing the wolves to hesitate. They retreated into the trees, growling low as they vanished. Jeff pressed on his cousin's wound, but it was too deep. Within a minute, the movement stopped. He pulled David's camera bag close and used his phone to call for help. Reception cut in and out, but a faint intermittent signal reached a nearby ranger station. Authorities arrived about 40 minutes later by snowmobile. They found Jeff sitting beside the body, shaking uncontrollably. Wolf tracks surrounded the site in a broad ring with drag marks leading back toward the tree line and the cached deer carcass. Provincial conservation officers, assisted by federal wildlife agents, closed the area within the hour. Samples were taken from bite margins for DNA analysis, and the implicated pack was later trapped and relocated to a remote management zone north of Reindeer Lake. Wildlife biologists suggested the wolves had been defending a food cache, not actively hunting, but the distinction mattered little to those who saw the aftermath. Then there's the story of Kevin Chen. It was December 9, 2018, and the hillside community of Canyon Vista in suburban Los Angeles was experiencing an unusually warm winter evening. The residential development, built where urban sprawl met the wild chaparral of the Santa Monica Mountains, featured homes perched on steep slopes with spectacular views of the city below. Kevin, a 16-year-old high school junior and varsity basketball player, was running late after practice and decided to take his usual shortcut through an undeveloped lot rather than follow the longer route along the main road. Kevin was an honor student and star athlete who balanced academic excellence with athletic achievement, earning recognition as one of his school's most promising college prospects. He lived with his parents and younger sister in a modern home that backed up against the natural open space that made Canyon Vista such a desirable address. Kevin often used the informal trails and vacant lots to move quickly between his home and school, a practice that had never caused any problems during his 4 years in the neighborhood. The Canyon Vista area had been experiencing increased wildlife activity following a series of devastating wildfires that had burned thousands of acres in the surrounding mountains. The fires had displaced numerous predators, forcing them to seek new territory and food sources in areas they had previously avoided. Local authorities had issued warnings about mountain lion sightings in residential areas, but most residents viewed these as routine precautions rather than serious threats. Kevin was aware of the wildlife warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals during his frequent use of the neighborhood's informal trail system. He carried his basketball gear in a backpack and typically moved quickly through the undeveloped areas, confident that his familiarity with the terrain and his athletic ability would keep him safe from any potential threats. Mountain lions are solitary predators that require large territories to support their hunting needs, with adult males controlling ranges of up to 100 square miles. Juvenile males are particularly dangerous as they establish new territories, often displaying more aggressive behavior than experienced adults. These young cats are less skilled at hunting natural prey and may target easier victims, including domestic animals and, occasionally, humans. Mountain lions are capable of incredible stealth and can stalk prey for extended periods before launching surprise attacks from close range. As Kevin jogged through the overgrown vacant lot, he was unaware that an 80 lb juvenile male mountain lion had been using the area as a hunting ground for domestic cats and small dogs that wandered from nearby homes. The young cat had been displaced from his natal territory by an older, more dominant male, and was desperately seeking to establish new hunting grounds that could support his survival. The mountain lion had been stalking Kevin for several hundred yards, moving silently through the dense brush while staying downwind to avoid detection. The cat's hunting instincts were triggered by Kevin's size, movement pattern, and the fact that he was alone and vulnerable in the predator's newly claimed territory. The attack came from behind as Kevin navigated through a particularly dense section of chaparral. The 80 lb mountain lion launched himself from the brush with explosive force, his powerful hind legs propelling him through the air to land squarely on Kevin's back. The impact drove Kevin face first into the rocky ground, while the cat's claws found purchase in his shoulders and back. The mountain lion's jaws clamped down on the back of Kevin's neck, his foreign canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae, while his bite force targeted the spinal cord. Kevin's attempts to fight back with his backpack proved futile against the cat's superior strength and positioning. The mountain lion's razor-sharp claws raked across Kevin's shoulders and torso, each swipe opening deep gashes that caused massive blood loss. Kevin's screams for help echoed through the hillside community, alerting residents in nearby homes to the emergency unfolding in the vacant lot. Several homeowners called 911 while attempting to locate the source of the disturbance, but the dense vegetation made it difficult to pinpoint Kevin's exact location. The mountain lion continued his attack for several minutes, driven by predatory instincts and the stress of establishing new territory. Police and paramedics arrived within 10 minutes of the first 911 call, using Kevin's continued cries for help to locate him in the brush. It's difficult to imagine the terror Kevin must have felt as the mountain lion approached. He was airlifted to a trauma center, but the blood loss and spinal injuries were too severe. He died during emergency surgery. I remember reading that the investigation revealed the mountain lion had been displaced by recent wildfires. It was just trying to survive, attempting to establish new territory in a residential area. The community where Kevin died, Canyon Vista, implemented comprehensive safety measures, including motion sensor lighting along informal trails, emergency communication systems, and mandatory wildlife awareness training. His family even established a memorial foundation to support wildlife safety education and habitat preservation programs, all in an effort to reduce human-wildlife conflicts. It was November 3, 2015, when another tragedy unfolded, this time on the sprawling grounds of Loner Exotic Ranch in East Texas. It was a place where wealthy clients paid exorbitant prices for photo sessions with dangerous predators. This private facility operated in the shadows of legitimate wildlife conservation, offering interactions that accredited zoos would never permit. I've always been troubled by these kinds of places. On that particular afternoon, the sun cast long shadows across enclosures housing tigers, lions, and other big cats acquired through what were questionable channels. Brandon Walsh, a 27-year-old personal trainer from Houston, had discovered the ranch through word-of-mouth recommendations. He was passionate about fitness and adventure, always seeking new challenges. He'd saved for months to afford this unique experience, viewing it as the ultimate test of his courage and confidence around dangerous animals. He'd built his personal training business through dedication and hard work, developing a reputation for helping clients overcome their fears. It seems his success, perhaps, had made him overconfident. Brandon paid the ranch's fee for a private photo session with Sasha, a 300-pound female Bengal tiger. The ranch owner, a former circus trainer, supervised the session, repeatedly emphasizing the extreme dangers involved. Bengal tigers are among the world's most powerful predators, with adult females weighing up to 350 pounds. They possess incredible strength, speed, and hunting instincts that remain sharp regardless of human contact. They're solitary, territorial animals that can become extremely aggressive when their personal space is violated. Their powerful jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch, and their razor-sharp claws can grow up to 4 inches long. The photo session began with Brandon positioned outside Sasha's enclosure, capturing dramatic shots of himself posed near the massive predator, maintaining the safety barrier between them. But Brandon quickly became frustrated with the distance. He wanted closer contact. He convinced the ranch owner to allow him closer access to Sasha, arguing that his physical conditioning and confident energy would keep the tiger calm. Against his better judgment and all established safety protocols, the owner agreed to let Brandon enter a smaller holding area adjacent to Sasha's main enclave. The holding area was separated from Sasha's territory by only a chain-link barrier, bringing Brandon within arm's reach of the massive predator. Brandon began posing for his camera, which was mounted on a tripod and set to take photos automatically. Then came Brandon's fatal mistake. He crouched down next to the barrier and extended his hand towards Sasha, believing that his confident demeanor would demonstrate his dominance over the apex predator. The tiger's ears flattened slightly against her massive head, and her tail began twitching. Sasha's attack was swift and devastating. I've seen the aftermath of accidents and negligence more times than I care to remember, but certain cases, they linger. The story of Brandon, for instance, still bothers me. A fitness model, using a captive tiger for a photo shoot, it ended, as you might expect, with a tragedy. The tiger, Sasha, was involved in an incident that cost Brandon his life. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but the damage was too severe. The ranch, it turned out, was operating without the necessary permits, ignoring safety regulations. Sasha was moved to a proper sanctuary, and the facility was shut down. Brandon's death became a stark reminder of the dangers of using wild animals as props. His family pursued legal action, arguing that the lack of safety measures led to the unthinkable. Then there's Tommy Rodriguez, his story a grim reminder of the consequences of desperation and neglect. It was August 19, 2013. The Missouri heat heavy in the air, and the stench of neglect hanging over Tommy's illegal breeding operation. For over a decade, Tommy had been running puppy mills, but financial press had pushed him to cut corners, a decision that would ultimately cost him everything. His 20-acre property was a labyrinth of makeshift kennels, housing nearly 80 dogs in varying states of breeding and neglect. He specialized in popular breeds, selling them at high prices to unsuspecting buyers. But the real money, I learned, came from the security side of his operation. 4 massive dogs patrolling the perimeter, 2 cane corsos, each weighing over 120 pounds, and 2 mastiff mixes, tipping the scales at nearly 140. These weren't pets, they were weapons, trained for aggression and acquired from a defunct fighting operation. The financial press that led to Tommy's demise had been building for months. Veterinary bills, feed costs, and facility maintenance had eroded his profits. Increased scrutiny from animal welfare organizations forced him to operate more carefully, but he cut back on everything. Food, medical care, even basic maintenance. The guard dogs, once fed premium meat, were reduced to scraps and cheap kibble. What Tommy didn't realize was that hungry guard dogs are far more dangerous. Hunger sharpens their predatory instincts, makes them more territorial, and reduces their tolerance for human presence. The 4 animals that had once been content to patrol now viewed everything on the property, including Tommy, as competition for scarce resources. The dogs had been showing increased aggression for weeks, fighting among themselves over food, marking territory more aggressively, and showing less deference to Tommy's commands. A smart operator would have recognized these warning signs, but Tommy was desperate, distracted, and dangerously overconfident. On that sweltering August night, Tommy made his final rounds of the property, checking on breeding females and security systems. It was past midnight, and the Missouri countryside was silent except for distant barking and the hum of inadequate ventilation fans. He carried a flashlight and a metal rod, but his mind was on financial calculations, not the danger lurking in the shadows. The guard dogs had been without food for 3 days, not by design, but because Tommy had been too busy with the sick litter to maintain their feeding schedule. Their hunger had reached a critical point where survival instincts overrode years of conditioning. They were no longer guard dogs protecting property. They were predators looking for their next meal. Tommy's mistake was approaching the area where he kept the guard dogs without proper precautions. Normally, he would have fed them first, ensuring their compliance before entering their territory. But financial stress and exhaustion had made him careless, and he walked directly into their domain, carrying nothing but a flashlight and false confidence. The attack began when Brutus, the larger cane corso, emerged from the shadows near the feeding area. His 125-pound frame moved with surprising silence, his massive head lowered in a hunting posture that Tommy should have recognized as a threat. Behind him came the others: Titan, the second cane corso; Rex, a 140-pound mastiff mix; and Scar, whose scarred muzzle told the story of his fighting background. Tommy realized the danger too late. As he turned to retreat, Brutus launched himself forward, his powerful jaws clamping down on Tommy's left eye with crushing force. The impact drove Tommy to the ground, his flashlight spinning away into darkness as he screamed for help that would never come. The other 3 dogs joined the attack within seconds, their pack instincts fully engaged. Rex grabbed Tommy's right arm, his massive jaws crushing bone as he shook violently. Titan went for the torso, his teeth tearing through clothing and flesh with mechanical efficiency. Scar circled the attack, darting in to bite and retreat, his fighting experience evident in his tactical approach. Tommy's screams echoed across the empty countryside, but his nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away. The dogs worked with the coordination of experienced predators. Their attacks focused on disabling their prey rather than killing quickly. They had learned patience in their previous lives, and hunger had made them methodical in their violence. The assault continued for nearly 20 minutes, the dogs taking turns feeding on Tommy while he was still alive. His struggles grew weaker as blood loss and shock took their toll, but the animals showed no mercy. They had been conditioned to view violence as normal, hunger as constant, and humans as either threats or food sources. I've seen the grim aftermath when animals turn on their masters. Tommy, who ran one of Missouri's largest illegal puppy mills, met such an end. His body lay broken in the dirt, partially consumed by the very guard dogs he used to protect his operation. For 3 weeks his remains went undiscovered, the dogs continuing to feed. The other dogs, trapped in kennels without food or water, starved. The stench of death eventually drew the attention of authorities investigating animal cruelty reports. What the sheriff's deputies found was a scene of unimaginable horror. Tommy's remains were scattered. Dozens of dogs lay dead or dying in makeshift kennels. The surviving guard dogs were shot on sight due to their aggression. The investigation revealed the full scope of Tommy's operation. breeding females in deplorable conditions, puppies dying from disease, and financial records showing sick animals sold across state lines. The surviving dogs were euthanized due to their poor health and aggressive conditioning. Tommy's death ended the puppy mill, but the cost extended far beyond his own life. The animals he exploited for profit became his executioners, their hunger turning them into monsters. Then there was Roberto Mendez, a 35-year-old landscaper working in the exclusive Cypress Point community in Florida on August 22, 2014. He built his landscaping business from nothing, supporting his wife and 2 young children. The development was built on former Everglades wetlands, an elaborate system of decorative ponds connected to natural waterways. Heavy rains had raised water levels, creating ideal conditions for wildlife movement. Roberto was familiar with Florida's wildlife and respected them, always checking water features before working near them. But on this day, while trimming bushes around a pond, his hedge trimmer slipped into the water. He waded in to retrieve it, assuming it was safe. The attack came the moment his feet touched the muddy bottom. A 10-foot female alligator, perfectly camouflaged, exploded into action. Her jaws clamped down on Roberto's right leg with devastating force, fracturing bone and tearing through arteries. The alligator initiated her signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water, pulling Roberto into the deeper center of the pond. His screams echoed across the manicured grounds as the alligator continued her relentless death roll, causing massive internal bleeding and tissue damage. The ornamental pond's clear water turned red as Roberto's struggles grew weaker. A homeowner heard the cries and rushed to investigate. I find myself thinking often about the ornamental pond in Cypress Point. It connected to natural waterways, you see, and that's how a 10-foot alligator entered a residential area undetected. It was there that the reptile dragged a man named Roberto into the deepest part of the pond. He drowned within minutes. It makes me wonder about how easily the wild can intrude and how quickly things can turn fatal. Now, I'm thinking about March 22nd, 2017. It was then that Tara Whitfield arrived at the Neptune Islands off the coast of South Australia. It's one of the world's premier great white shark diving destinations. The remote rocky outcrops jutted from the Southern Ocean, surrounded by crystal-clear waters that plunged to depths of over 200 feet. These nutrient-rich waters served as a natural highway for migrating great whites, drawing the massive predators to hunt the abundant seal colonies. Tara, a 38-year-old marine biology graduate student from Los Angeles, booked the most expensive shark cage diving package available, and almost immediately she began making unreasonable demands. She was known for her entitled attitude, a belief that money could buy her anything. She berated Captain Steve Morrison and marine biologist Dr. Lisa Chen multiple times during the morning briefing. Her boyfriend, Brad Mitchell, watched uncomfortably as Tara screamed at the crew for what she called their pathetic safety restrictions. Captain Morrison, with 18 years of experience operating in these dangerous waters, had dealt with difficult clients before, of course. But Tara's aggressive behavior and complete lack of empathy alarmed him. She repeatedly demanded that the protective cage be removed entirely, claiming she had paid premium prices and deserved unrestricted access to the sharks. When Dr. Lisa Chen attempted to explain the life-threatening dangers, Tara dismissed her as an incompetent employee who was clearly jealous of successful people. Tara had convinced herself that her graduate student status and expensive booking fee entitled her to special treatment. She threatened to destroy the company's reputation online and file lawsuits if the crew didn't provide her with the extreme experience she demanded. Her complete disregard for safety became evident when she suggested that crew members should enter the water first to test whether the sharks were dangerous. The waters around Neptune Islands hosted some of the largest great white sharks on Earth, apex predators that had ruled these seas for over 400 million years. These magnificent hunters can reach lengths of over 20 feet and weights exceeding 4,000 pounds, with massive triangular heads housing rows of razor-sharp serrated teeth. Each tooth measures up to 3 inches in length and is designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Great whites possess the most powerful bite force of any living creature, capable of exerting over 4,000 pounds per square inch of crushing press. The crew had successfully attracted multiple great white sharks using a carefully prepared chum mixture. Among the responding predators was a massive 18-foot female, estimated to weigh over 4,000 pounds, that had been feeding aggressively on the bait. The enormous shark displayed classic hunting behaviors, circling the boat with calculated precision while investigating the steel diving cage. Before entering the water, Tara secretly loosened the connections on her diving regulator, planning to create a fake equipment malfunction that would justify exiting the protective cage. She believed she was clever enough to manipulate the situation to get the unrestricted shark access she felt entitled to. Once submerged in the protective cage, Tara immediately began signaling fake distress to the surface crew, pointing frantically at her sabotaged regulator. Captain Morrison initiated emergency procedures to bring her to the surface. But instead of ascending, Tara swam away from the cage toward the feeding sharks, believing her superior intelligence made her invulnerable. Her erratic swimming movements created the exact type of distressed prey behavior that triggers great white hunting instincts. The massive female great white detected Tara's panicked swimming immediately and abandoned the chum bait to investigate this new potential prey. The enormous predator approached from below at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. The shark's assault was swift and devastating. Rising from the depths like a living torpedo, the great white struck Tara from below with tremendous force, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of gleaming serrated teeth. The impact drove Tara upward as the shark's jaws clamped down around her torso with bone-crushing press. The razor-sharp teeth sliced through her wet suit and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite force of 4,000 pounds per square inch shattered Tara's ribcage instantly, puncturing both lungs and severing major blood vessels throughout her torso. The shark's powerful jaw muscles continued applying press, while its head thrashed violently from side to side, the signature feeding behavior that allows great whites to tear away large chunks of flesh. The violent shaking motion severed Tara's body at the waist, separating her upper and lower torso. I've seen what these animals can do, the power in their jaws, the speed of their attacks. I've spent years studying the sometimes fatal consequences of underestimating the animal kingdom. There are moments when nature delivers a brutal lesson, a stark reminder that our perceived dominance is fragile. One such moment occurred during a shark cage diving experience when a woman named Tara met a gruesome end. Massive amounts of blood clouded the water as a shark consumed portions of her body before disappearing into the depths. Tara died within seconds from massive blood loss, traumatic shock, and the destruction of vital organs. Her belief that money could override natural predator behavior proved fatally wrong. The investigation revealed deliberate equipment sabotage and violation of safety protocols. Then there was Harold Thompson on March 22, 2015 in Alabama. The sun beat down on his property as barking echoed from kennels scattered across his 5 acres. At 71, Hank moved slowly between the enclosures, carrying water with the confidence that came from 20 years of dog breeding. He and his wife Martha had built their operation from nothing, specializing in Rottweilers and German Shepherds. What had started as a hobby had grown into a modest business, but age had made Hank careless. In his younger days, he never would have entered a kennel alone, especially with breeding males during territorial phases. Experience had bred overconfidence. The centerpiece of their operation was Brutus, a 130-pound Rottweiler whose massive frame made him their most sought-after stud. At 4 years old, he was in his prime, with a bloodline tracing back to German working dogs. His offspring commanded premium prices. Recently, Brutus had been showing increased aggression. A minor injury to his left rear leg had left him limping and irritable, causing him to snap at Martha when she tried to examine the wound. The veterinarian had prescribed pain medication, but the dog's temperament had grown increasingly unpredictable. Martha had expressed concerns about Hank working alone with Brutus, especially given the dog's recent mood changes, but Hank dismissed her worries with stubborn confidence. He'd raised Brutus from a puppy and believed their bond was unbreakable. On that March afternoon, Martha had driven into town for supplies, leaving Hank alone with the dogs. The kennels needed cleaning. Water bowls required filling, work Hank had done thousands of times before. Brutus watched from his kennel as Hank approached, the dog's dark eyes tracking every movement with an intensity that should have served as a warning. The animal was panting heavily despite the shade, his injured leg causing him to shift uncomfortably. Pain had a way of making even docile animals unpredictable, and Brutus was far from docile. Hank unlocked the kennel gate and stepped inside, bucket in hand, his attention focused on the dirty water bowl in the corner. He'd performed this routine hundreds of times, but today, Brutus was different. The dog's ears were pinned back, his tail held low, his massive body coiled with tension. As Hank bent down to clean the water bowl, his back turned to the dog, Brutus made his decision. There was no growling, no warning, just 130 pounds of muscle launching through the air with devastating force. The impact drove Hank face first into the concrete floor, his bucket clattering away as Brutus's jaws found their target. The dog's teeth sank deep into Hank's throat, crushing his windpipe and severing major blood vessels in a single catastrophic bite. Hank's hands clawed desperately at the animal's massive head, but Brutus had locked on with predatory determination. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone with mechanical efficiency. Hank's screams were cut short by the damage to his throat, replaced by a wet gurgling sound that grew weaker by the second. Blood pooled beneath his body as Brutus continued his attack, driven by instinct spread into his lineage for generations. The assault lasted less than 3 minutes, but the damage was irreversible. When Brutus finally released his grip, Hank lay motionless on the kennel floor, his life ebbing away in the Alabama heat. Martha returned home 2 hours later to find the property strangely quiet. She called out for Hank as she walked toward the kennels but received no response. When she rounded the corner and saw Brutus standing guard over her husband's body, the full horror became clear. The dog's reaction to Martha's presence was immediate and threatening. He positioned himself between her and Hank's body, his lips pulled back in a snarl. Martha backed away slowly, dialing 911 from her truck. Sheriff's deputies arrived within 20 minutes, but Brutus refused to allow anyone near Hank's body. After consulting with animal control, the decision was made to shoot Brutus rather than risk additional casualties. The massive Rottweiler died with 3 bullets in his chest. The investigation concluded that Hank's death was a tragic accident caused by his failure to recognize warning signs of an aggressive, injured animal. The breeding operation was shut down, the remaining dogs relocated, and Martha was left to grieve both her husband and the animal that had been part of their family. Then, on September 3, 2013, near the Toklat River in Denali National Park, Alaska. By early afternoon, the wind had dropped and the landscape stood still, open and silent. From a distance, it looked calm, a place where nothing could happen quickly. But the quiet there was deceptive. Sarah Miller, 26, was an experienced backpacker from Anchorage. She was known for her, I find it difficult to imagine the final moments. A camera recovered the timestamp showing a photograph taken just 6 minutes before the estimated time of death. It's chilling. The park closed multiple backcountry zones along the migration corridor after that. Sarah, a solo traveler in Denali, was incredibly skilled and prepared. She trusted her abilities over relying on excessive gear. She planned a 2-day loop near the Tlat River, specifically timed to coincide with the caribou migration. Wolves, it was known, often trailed these herds. She carried bear spray, a GPS beacon, and enough food for 2 nights. Solo travel wasn't new to her. She'd been doing it for years, documenting her treks for hiking blogs. She'd properly filed for the required Denali backcountry permits. Rangers recalled she inquired about late-season wolf movements but didn't seem concerned when told sightings had increased near the river. Wolves were indeed following caribou herds migrating south, and fresh tracks had been spotted just days before. But to Sarah, it was simply part of the environment, something she respected, not feared. Those wolves in the area averaged between 70 and 100 pounds. They were built for endurance and speed, capable of covering 40 miles in a day. Their jaws delivered a bite force of nearly 400 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush bone. Still, they rarely approached people. living primarily on caribou, hares, and ground squirrels. But when prey grew scarce, or human scent carried traces of food, curiosity sometimes lingered. That week, rangers had posted advisories near trailheads, noting that several hikers reported wolves trailing them at a distance. Sarah likely read those postings when she signed out, though there's no record she changed her route. Her confidence in her precautions was understandable. Statistically, Denali's wolves avoided confrontation. Around 4 p.m., a tourist group in a vehicle spotted a lone figure standing on a gravel bar below the ridge. The hiker waved. Later, clothing and timing confirmed it was Sarah. She continued upstream toward her campsite. She reached her final GPS coordinate sometime before 4:45 p.m. The last photos on her recovered camera showed wide shots of the river valley and a small group of wolves following a caribou herd in the mid-distance. Tracks found later indicated she moved off the main gravel bar toward higher ground, likely planning to cut inland. The first sign of struggle began about half a mile from her tent. Her GPS unit recorded erratic movement, rapid looping, then a sudden stop. Investigators reconstructed what happened next through physical evidence and predator behavior analysis. The wolves had diverted toward her position once the herd passed out of sight. Sarah likely saw them at a distance, deploying her bear spray once. Residue was detected on nearby vegetation. Wind readings that afternoon showed a westward shift, causing partial blowback of the spray mist. It worked briefly, driving the wolves about 20 feet back before the cloud dispersed. They began to circle again, emboldened by the fading chemical scent. One flank of the group approached from behind, following her retreat up a shallow embankment. Handprints pressed deep into the soil showed she climbed in haste. Blood marks began at the top of the slope. One wolf likely lunged first, grabbing her backpack or arm. The straps were torn clean through, consistent with a pulling force rather than a cut. A second wolf joined, aiming lower, its bite breaking the skin along her thigh. She tried to fight back. The spray canister lay spent beside her pack, but the group coordinated, one attacking from the rear, the others darting forward. The ground at the site was churned with soil and hair, suggesting several minutes of movement before she was forced down. Analysis of tissue marks later revealed crushing bites to the neck and shoulder, consistent with a killing grip, the kind wolves use to suffocate large prey. Her jacket was shredded, and the torn sleeve recovered 20 feet away still held fragments of skin and fabric. Search efforts began that night, with both ground crews and a helicopter dispatched after rangers noted her vehicle unmoved. The aircraft spotted a disturbed patch of gravel near the Tlat Channel the next morning. Sarah's body lay partially covered by soil and debris, her left arm missing, likely carried off by scavengers after the attack. They collected the camera and other items for analysis and later confirmed through timestamps that her final photograph was taken just 6 minutes before the estimated time of death. Genetic sampling confirmed the wolves belonged to the Tlat pack. Investigators determined the attack began as a predatory test or prey proxy response that escalated fatally. But with no repeated approach or food-seeking behavior observed, no removals were ordered. At a private debrief, rangers explained the findings to Sarah's parents, who later issued a short statement urging that the park not punish what it protects. Then, on April 14, 2018, Monica Barrett arrived at Everglades National Park in Florida, one of the largest tropical wilderness areas in the United States. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched across 1.5 million acres of sawgrass marshes and shallow waterways, home to some of North America's most dangerous predators. The park's intricate network of channels created the perfect habitat for massive American alligators. Monica Barrett, a 44-year-old divorce attorney from Miami, had booked a solo kayak tour to clear her head after a difficult custody case. Known for her aggressive courtroom tactics and confrontational personality, she had built her legal career on intimidating opponents and refusing to back down from any challenge. Her reputation for getting her way through sheer force of will had created a dangerous sense of entitlement. Tommy Rodriguez, a 52-year-old tour guide with over 20 years of experience, immediately recognized Monica as a problematic client during the morning safety briefing. She had interrupted his presentation. "I've seen firsthand what happens when people disregard the power of nature. I recall one case in particular, a woman named Monica who visited a park during peak alligator breeding season. She repeatedly told the tour guide that her legal background somehow made her smarter than a swamp guide. She even threatened lawsuits when he tried to enforce basic safety protocols. Park rangers tried to warn her about nesting season, but she dismissed it all as government overreach. The thing is, during this time, territorial male alligators become extremely aggressive, protecting their nesting areas. Park officials usually restrict access and post warning signs. American alligators are formidable apex predators. Adult males can reach 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds. Their bite force, over 3,000 pounds per square inch. Tommy, the tour guide, repeatedly warned everyone to stay within designated channels. Monica, however, became increasingly belligerent, accusing him of limiting her rights and threatening legal action. Despite his attempts to keep the group together, she broke away and paddled her kayak toward a restricted lagoon marked with warning signs. She claimed she had the right to explore any area as a tax-paying citizen. This lagoon was a primary nesting area for a massive 12-foot bull alligator that had been defending his territory for weeks. The 800-pound reptile had already driven off smaller males. Monica's kayak immediately triggered his most aggressive instincts. He detected the vibrations from her paddle strokes within seconds. The alligator had been resting motionless beneath the surface, perfectly camouflaged. The attack was swift and devastating. The 800-pound predator launched itself from the water, its jaws clamping down on the front of Monica's kayak. The impact capsized her instantly, throwing her into the murky water. As she struggled, disoriented and panicked, the alligator identified her as a threat. His jaws found purchase on her torso, teeth puncturing her life jacket and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite shattered ribs, punctured lungs, and severed major blood vessels. Then came the death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause massive internal trauma. The reptile rotated rapidly, spinning Monica's body while maintaining its crushing grip. The violent rotation tore muscles and caused catastrophic internal injuries. The death roll continued for over a minute. Her punctured lungs filled with water, and the crushing press prevented breathing. Her shattered ribs ground against each other, causing more internal bleeding. The combination of trauma, drowning, and blood loss proved fatal within minutes. The alligator eventually released her lifeless body. Tommy radioed for help, but it was too late. On May 14, 2017, in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Sarah Johnson, a 29-year-old nurse from Atlanta, was hiking with her fiancé, Tom. They were celebrating their engagement. Sarah loved nature photography and always carried her camera. Her medical background gave her practical knowledge of emergencies, but her experience with dangerous wildlife was limited. She'd been hiking throughout the Southeast for years, building her confidence. These mountain getaways were essential stress relief from her demanding job. That afternoon, they discovered 2 black bear cubs playing in the tall grass, with no mother in sight. Sarah recognized this as a once-in-a-lifetime photo opportunity. Black bears are North America's most common bear species, but a mother bear with cubs, well, that's a different story. They become exponentially more aggressive and territorial than solitary individuals. I've read accounts of female bears attacking without warning, seeing any human presence near their cubs as a mortal threat that must be eliminated immediately. They possess incredible strength and speed, capable of running up to 30 km/h through dense forest. It's a primal force, nature at its most protective. I read a story once about a woman named Sarah who was on an engagement trip with her fiancé, Tom. They were hoping to create incredible memories. They encountered some bear cubs. Sarah began photographing the adorable cubs from what she believed was a safe distance, but her excitement at capturing such rare footage led her to gradually move closer for better shots. Tom repeatedly urged her to maintain distance and leave the area, but Sarah was convinced that the mother bear was not nearby. The cubs continued their playful behavior, wrestling and tumbling through the meadow grass while Sarah documented their every move. The photography session continued for nearly 10 minutes as she captured dozens of images. Sarah's fatal mistake was positioning herself between the cubs and their natural escape route to the forest edge. As she moved to get a better angle for her shots, she unknowingly blocked the path the cubs would take to reach safety if threatened. This triggered the protective instincts of their mother, who had been watching from the tree line. The mother bear's charge from the forest was swift and terrifying. The 200 lb female covered the distance to Sarah's position in seconds, her powerful legs propelling her massive frame with surprising speed. Her territorial fury was focused entirely on eliminating the perceived threat to her cubs. Sarah attempted to retreat when she saw the charging bear, but her foot caught on a fallen log, and she tumbled backward while still clutching her camera. The mother bear reached Sarah's position before she could regain her footing, striking her with bone-crushing force. The bear's massive paw connected with Sarah's back, her razor-sharp claws raking across Sarah's spine and shoulders while the impact shattered several ribs. Sarah's camera flew from her grip as the bear's enormous weight pinned her to the ground. Her attempts to call for help were silenced by the crushing press on her chest. The mother bear's powerful jaws clamped down on Sarah's neck, her crushing bite force fracturing vertebrae and severing vital arteries. The bear's protective instincts drove her to continue the assault until she was certain the threat to her cubs had been completely eliminated. Within minutes, Sarah's movement ceased as the mother bear's brutal assault proved fatal. The protective mother remained near Sarah's body for several more minutes, ensuring the threat was neutralized before gathering her cubs and disappearing into the dense forest. Park rangers arrived over an hour later in response to Tom's emergency call, but Sarah was already dead from massive trauma. The bear family was tracked but left undisturbed, as wildlife officials determined the mother had been acting within normal protective behavioral patterns when defending her young. Sarah's death devastated the hiking community and prompted enhanced educational programs about wildlife safety and proper distance protocols. Her family established a foundation promoting wilderness safety education, ensuring her passion for conservation would continue through enhanced protection for both wildlife and outdoor enthusiasts.